I started out the show clarifying a concept that I think is a conundrum for a lot of people who consider the beliefs of Calvinists, or those who are reformed in their convictions about salvation, those that believe in unconditional election, that God is responsible for our salvation if we have it, and we are responsible for our sin, and we have that. And so therefore those who go to hell because they deserve that, and those who go to heaven by God's mercy, which they don't deserve. And since his mercy is free and his grace is free, he can give it to whomever he wants. He elects a group to give that to, and he secures it for them. And that raises the question of unconditional election and sovereign grace on the one hand, and freedom of choice on the other. And where is there freedom in such a system? And the Bible seems to teach freedom. So how do you bring those two together? And so I spent some time talking about that by nuancing the concept of freedom. I also mentioned that there was only one kind of Calvinist, a five-pointer, and anything less is not really a Calvinist, I think, because all of the alleged 5 points of Calvinism are tied together: total depravity, unconditional election, irresistible grace, perseverance of the saints, and limited atonement. And there are people who say, well, I'm a 4-point Calvinist because I believe in the other thing, but I don't believe in the limited atonement business, because they are aware that the scriptures teach that Jesus died for all. So how do you make sense of that? And I think this concept of limited atonement is been misunderstood by a lot of people. And in fact, some have pointed out that the concept limited, or I should say the word limited, is the wrong word to use, and that particular would be more precise. And I think you'll see why when I give the explanation that I give on why I believe in limited or particular atonement, and why that isn't a problem for me biblically. In fact, you should believe in it too, even if you're not a Calvinist. At least believe in it the way I understand it to be. So the first thing I have to do, though, to make some sense out of this is I have to define a term, and that term is atonement. So let me tell you what I mean by atonement. I know, by the way, that there are a number of different theories of atonement, but I have a particular view in mind, and that is shared, I think, by those who are also Calvinists. We are talking, when we are talking about limited or particular atonement, we are talking about an atonement that is, listen carefully, the payment for sin that is made to avert God's anger towards the sinner. Let me say that again. Atonement is the payment for sin that is made to avert God's anger towards the sinner. So with that definition in mind, a series of questions, because I want to give you an illustration to help you to see how this works together. Since atonement is a payment, I want to talk about the nature of payments. When you pay a bill, is the bill still owed? You send in your check, you give them your credit card number, the check goes through, the credit card company pays the charge. Is the bill still owed? If they come back to you, the restaurant or the business concern or the telephone company or the electrical company, if they come back to you and say, you still owe us, can't you just say, well, look, here's the record of the payment? Since the payment is made, then the bill is no longer owed. Now that's very straightforward. In other words, when the payment is made for the bill, the debt is canceled. Right? All right, now that's what payment means. So when a sin is actually paid for, and that's our definition of atonement. If it is atoned for, then the sin bill is paid, right? It's no longer owed. There is a release of the debt. You might say there is a forgiveness of the debt. And with forgiveness, salvation. Therefore, anyone, now listen carefully, everyone whose sins have been atoned for, those sins have been paid for, and everyone whose sins have been paid for is forgiven. And everyone who is forgiven is going to heaven. Therefore, everyone whose sin has been atoned for is going to heaven. Let me say that again. Everyone whose sin is atoned for is going to heaven, because atonement means paying the bill. Therefore, if atonement is not limited in some sense, then universalism is true. Every human being goes to heaven. If the atonement is not limited in some sense, then everyone gets the atonement. And if everyone gets the atonement, then everyone's sin is atoned for, everyone's sin bill is paid, everyone is forgiven, and everyone goes to heaven. And that's a problem, isn't it? Because it doesn't seem like the Bible teaches that everyone goes to heaven. Some go to heaven and some don't. Some have their crimes paid for by someone else, Jesus, and some don't. And those who don't pay for them themselves. And the place where the payment is made is called hell. So it seems to me that atonement has to be limited in some sense, or else universalism is true. Universalism is not true, therefore atonement must be limited in some sense.